I would say in that is I think that's a good example of a strategy conflicting with the values. And in that situation, what you're saying is that the change process and the way that it's structured with the rewards are out of whack with the values around looking after people or whatever it is. And how would you improve that? Well, obviously, ideally, come up with a better strategy to start off with. But if you're in the midst of it, I guess I would be challenging the leaders in the organisation on the basis of what their stated values are.
I think certainly if the change is driven by an ethical improvement, then you've got to be really clear in articulating what that value prospect is, and in the greater good, in the organisational good, because as soon as it's not evident and as soon as it's a politically correct change, you automatically have people looking for the least intrusive methodologies and defaulting precisely to those. So that's the really big issue, and that value prospect is fundamental in anything or any successful change that we want to make.
Can I bring a different perspective? I've seen leaders in large NGOs and other places that love change, bring about change and advocate for change, and it's going to be heresy in a university, but people say change is great, let's all be ready for change, and I know the world's changing, but sometimes the people in those places are looking for stability, reassurance. This is a chaplain speaking, not a leader. They're looking for stability, reassurance, and not change every 5 minutes, and that's easy to say and harder to live. What I mean is, in the bank, we had a general manager who said, I'm going to change it from 10 regions to 14 regions and spill all the regional leader jobs because that's my mark and my ego. Then the next guy came in and said, I'm going to change it from 14 regions down to 10 regions because I want to leave my mark. And all that left was with everybody in change mode all the time, fearing for their jobs, no ethical decision making. It was actually about leaving one's mark on the organisation, and there was no argument or move for change. And I don't mean when contracts, like, with a job network contract, where it's every 3 years and you've got to be savvy and ready and government imposes change. But I'm talking about change for change's sake, because it looked good for some people that we were changing and this leader was leaving his mark, or her mark, at great human cost.
Can I perhaps attack this from a different perspective? Our whole environment's changing almost on a daily basis, and it's only getting more complex. And I think the pace of change is actually ramping up. In fact, I'm absolutely sure it is. And we're starting to see things like some of those great institutions, the banking institution, the police years ago. I mean, we had our Royal Commission, we beat everyone. Then you have the churches and the institutional Royal Commission that we've just had. So there's this huge amount of change, and I really worry about the future, about our political systems and their ability to cope with the level of change that we're dealing with. And I actually think that one of the things that we all have responsibility for as leaders in our organisations, and I include that everyone in this room in this, is about making sure that the fundamental things, the fundamental stability and building blocks of our organisations are solid enough to withstand that change. And that's about the principles and values and making sure we've got systems that cement that in place. So no matter what happens in the layer above, where the change is occurring on an absolutely frenetic pace for all of us, that the resilience of the organisation is strong enough to maintain its values and principles while allowing the change to wash over, and the next change, and the next change, and the next change. And I think the community is really looking to organisations to provide that stability. And I think they look for it as a rock, because that's what they try and make sense of when they're faced with the multitude of changes that happen. I don't worry about the future. I see the people who follow us in our organisations, and I know how good they are, and I know that we're doing our best to develop them. But those foundation blocks are sacrosanct. They've got to be honoured and they've got to be maintained. so that everything in that layer above, that operational layer of our organisations, the things we do are on a bedrock that people can trust, because that trust is going to become more and more of a commodity into the future, a very important commodity.
Yeah, too true. Very true.